Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast exploring life-changing career moves. I'm your host, Brian Akar. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the bold decisions that transform their careers and lives. Let's dive in. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Why I Left. Today, we have a fantastic episode lined up for you. We're diving into the journey of Elena Agar, who has not only shifted her own career, but is also empowering others to do the same through her transformative work in talent development, leadership, and well-being. We'll explore her story from academia to launching multiple ventures and learn how she's helping both individuals and organizations thrive in an increasingly competitive world. So, whether you're looking for inspiration to make your own leap or even just insights into today's rapidly changing work environment, this episode is exactly for you. Let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. So our guest today is Elena Agar, a leader in talent acquisition, development, and a passionate advocate for human potential. She's the founder of Shift, an organization focused on helping people and businesses enhance their well-being and career fulfillment. And Elena herself has an incredible journey, from academia to co-founding multiple ventures like Bloom Youth and Bessern, and authoring 2 books on leadership and personal development. She's also the host of Shift with Elena Agar, a podcast dedicated to helping professionals unlock their performance and leadership potential, on which I've been fortunate enough to have been a guest. And her work, it spans from New York to Dubai and really all over, where she's making a global impact on how we think about growth and leadership. So it's a pleasure to have her here today. Elena, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you. It's so good to see you.
Likewise. As we were, getting ready to start, I'm like, we're so much like pros at this now. We've talked like 2 or 3 times. And so this feels very natural. And I love that, I'm now having you getting the opportunity to have you on the show, because I just think it's your story has been one that I've been following. And I just love that you took some time to come with us. And so for those who may not know who you are, I want to take you back to some of the early stages of your career and just share with us a little bit about, what led you from academia to working in corporate, and really, who you are and how that shift shaped your view on human potential.
I wish there was like a particular step-by-step that I took, but honestly, for me, it was just my continuous experimentation and making sure I have a job. And then it just out of that, I've created this career. But I started my career in higher education and worked at different kind of organizations and institutions within the higher education space. Then it became a little bit too slow for me. And I was like, okay, I need to move somewhere. So I decided to go in corporate learning because it was kind of natural transition. And then from there, I kind of started to feel, I was like, yeah, I think this is kind of where I want to be. I really enjoy working with people. I'm kind of good at it, hopefully, right? So I'm getting good feedback. So it's kind of a nice space to be. And then I decided to start my business, my first business in 2019, which was Bessern, really focusing on performance and well-being in organizations. And then through that, I've really, for the last 5 years, I've had this journey where I'm involved with a lot of corporates. I picked up this talent acquisition space. It just kind of felt natural. I've also picked up on my coaching and so on. And what's been interesting is to see, like, over the years that I've been doing this, it's been 15 plus years that I've been in this talent development space and in these different spaces. I've done this in different countries around the world. I've done this in 14 different countries at least. So interacted with so many different individuals. And what I've learned is that at the end of the day, we're all people. And there's a lot of focus on this performance and productivity in the workplace, but we forgot that we're just dealing with people and humans. And so I've decided to heavily even incorporate more in that wellness piece in everything that I do. So, and along came the podcast, as you know, 4 years ago, crossing over 200 episodes where I talk about all of these topics, which is equally as exciting to me. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I got here.
No, I love that. And that your focus on the humanity of people is something that I think has allowed, we really gravitated towards each other when we first connected, because I feel similar things, right? That a lot of times as we all are striving to grow and do whatever, at times folks tend to lose the humanity piece of it, which we shouldn't, right? And so I love that you're really instilling that in others. And so you touched on this in some of your work, right? So all over the globe, 14 different countries I heard you mention. And so how is working across such a diverse landscape globally really influence your approach to talent development and leadership overall?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, to be fair, there is different business context everywhere that you work. So there's a lot of cultural consideration when working in specific countries like Middle East versus Asia versus North America. But overall, I think you come to realize that when we talk about organizations or leadership, people are people, and at the end of the day, we just need to we need to do something we enjoy. We need to have purpose in the work that we do. We need to have people that we can trust to be around. We need to feel safe. We want to belong. That takes me back to just being human, and I think it's just true across board. Again, with some consideration to culture and so on. And it's been really eye opening because when we talk about leadership, the cultural piece comes in because in some countries, this, empathy or, this kind of leading by example, it doesn't mean the same thing in every country. There's a lot of ego driven aspects to some cultures and how leaders lead in those cultures. There's a lot of, specific kind of cases where it's just you're seen as a weak person if you are leading with empathy. So that's been really interesting. But what I know for sure is that, just approaching leadership from a humanity point of view always works, no matter where I've done this at. So there are some differences in how people lead, but it never fails to lead with that empathy. It never fails to lead by example. It never fails to kind of actually care about the people that are working for you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So here on this show, we talk a lot about career transitions and pivots and things like that. And as I've mentioned earlier, your path has really been filled with a lot of bold moves: academia, entrepreneurship, all these things, corporate. So were there any pivotal moments where you doubted your direction that you were taking in your career?
Yeah, I definitely in my 20s. So when I was leaving higher ed and I was trying to transition to L&D. And I remember I was having several conversations with friends and I was like, I'm not sure where I want to go. And just through like basic research, I was like, I think L&D, like learning and development, talent space is kind of where that sounds good. But I wasn't really sure because I didn't really have that understanding of necessarily what L&D was. It sounded good and so on. So I definitely was questioning myself there. Probably spend a couple of years just in complete like, what is going on? Is this really what I want to do type thing? Um, but honestly, I feel like it's continuously, even now, I think I'm still questioning certain things, but I trust my gut. I think I've done this enough to where I might not know exactly where I'm going next. I have some ideas, I have a vision, I have some thoughts, but I also trust that no matter where I end up, it's going to be exactly where I need to be because everything I do now has a little bit more conscious decision making. It has 15 years of experience behind me in this area. So I think I don't know if we ever like sure exactly where we're gonna go. I think it's just with experience and tuning into your values and what you stand for and what you enjoy, what brings you energy, what brings you income, right? Like where are you good, where can you monetize? I think with years, you learn to trust yourself a little bit more. But I wouldn't say if I'm like super like know exactly where I'm going to go. I have some thoughts and ideas, but also having been through this several times, as you mentioned, I also know that I don't know what I don't know. And all I can do is make decisions based on what I have now in front of me, based on the current societal, geographical, economical situation that can potentially change. I mean, example would be like COVID, right? I started my first business a year before COVID, like less than a year before COVID kicked in. So we cannot predict that, but I think trusting myself in the process has been the biggest kind of game changer for me.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And as you think about some of those pivots, what was maybe your most pivotal career transition, and how did you really handle navigating that time?
I think quitting my full time job in 2019, I've always done freelancing and consulting on the side, no matter what full time job I had, but I never actually, went full on onto myself, like on like and actually like trusting that I can sustain myself and I can make money and I can do this, and so that's probably been the most pivotal, the scariest. It was very difficult. I lost a lot of sleep. I was very anxious. I was very stressed. this, but it also gave me confidence that I have today, which is I know that no matter where I am, I can make money, I can sustain myself, I can, pay my bills and so on. I took a chance on myself and I built that confidence. I was afraid, but I still did it anyway. And I think that's been the most pivotal, because looking back, I had a couple of avenues to go through. So I remember actually at the time that I was thinking about changing, I also had an opportunity to pursue a different job that was kind of exciting and interesting and so on. And I asked myself, I was like one foot in the door in that job. And then I was asking myself, I was like, is this really what I want to, like, is that where I want to invest my time? Like, is this, like starting over? Because at that point I was with my employer at that time for almost 4 years. And I was like, do I really want to start over, have to prove myself at a new company, put all that energy in? And the answer was like, yeah, I don't. I don't. I actually want to, like, it was a great opportunity, but I was like, no, I think I just want to I want to take a chance on myself, because I don't know when else I'll have that freedom, flexibility, and opportunity to do that. Now that I'm thinking about this, like I'm speaking about this, it's pretty just reflecting as I've been saying this out loud. But yeah, so that was probably the most pivotal.
Like you said, you wanted to bet on yourself. You end up co-founding Bessern and Bloom Youth and all those things. Clearly, it played a decision into you leaving corporate. So what did you want to achieve when you launched these ventures?
Yeah, so full transparency, when we started Bestern, we had some big dreams. Like we were pitching to investors. We got funding from, I was living in Dubai at that time. We got funding from UAE government. We were going to be the next Better Up, if anybody knows Better Up, like that. It's like a coaching, well-being platform, very cool. And we were just like full on. We had all these big dreams, and what really wanted to build a company. We wanted to build a company, wanted to build a household name, wanted to be like the next best thing, right, in performance and well-being in organizations. Incorporated a lot of science and so on. Funny enough, after that experience, where I am now, through that experience, what I've learned is that I don't really want to have a company like that. Like, I don't want to have employees. I don't want to manage people. We
Right.
had staff at that time as well. And my business partner at that time was really good at like managing people. I'm like, I realized like I'm good at it. But when you're an entrepreneur, I think that's the biggest struggle I had, because you are on such a hustle mode. And it actually gave me a lot of empathy to do what I do now and working with leadership, because it's very different being a leader in a corporate versus being an entrepreneur and so on. And so it's just different experiences. So when it comes to leadership, you have to be very aware of like, where can you be a good leader? And for me, in my own business, I wasn't the best at it. In a corporate, I am, because it was a little bit different, because I was only responsible for like a department, right? So as a manager, I was responsible for a department. I didn't have to worry about bringing business in, versus in my own business, it was like I was the marketing, I was the sales. I had to like, I was learning things I could care less about because I had to for my business. So I was so spread out that managing people on top of that was just not a thing I wanted to do at the time. And that was really a big reflection for me at that time, after I walked away from that venture. And I was like, I don't think I need to have a team. I'm an entrepreneur, and I want to have grind. I'd rather have like another like CEO who does that, or like a
Got it.
COO who does the people management piece, and I just do the work and like the business development. Anyway, so but we can talk more about that. But so that was the aim, is to do that. We weren't able to raise the funds, and I always found it funny, because we pitched to maybe like over 50 investors over a period of like a few months, and it was always came down to like, well, if you have this many tens of thousands of users on your app, because we had an MVP, then we'll give you the money. And I'm like, if I had that, I wouldn't need your money. I'd be, like, it's like a chicken and egg. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So anyway, so our dream so we ended up operating as a small business, but and we did well for the time that we were together. And then we end up moving away from the country we were at, and so we kind of exited from that. And then Bloom Youth was really just my passion for higher education and helping young people close the gap between when they graduate from college to actually going into the corporate space. And a lot of times what I've found, I've tried to make it a monetizable business. frankly speaking, I was trying to make it a commercial business, but I couldn't because it's very difficult working with universities. A lot of them don't want to invest the budgets in it. And this was back in 2019, 2018. I've started it actually even before that, like 2016 or 17, I think I started like working with universities. And what I quickly came to realize is that it wasn't a priority for them then. I think now things have changed, and now universities are more investing in these kind of, programs and engagements for their students. But before it wasn't the case. And so I still wanted to continue to do the work. So I decided to do the nonprofit, and it still exists today. And the aim is really just the same missions to help students, find those jobs post graduation, help them close the gap, help them, with different areas that simply they don't learn in universities, which is how to network, how to build relationships, how to pitch yourself to a job, how to create a personal brand, how to do a job search strategically, how to do what to do when you don't know what to do. So that's still in play, and it's my baby, and I'm very much passionate about the project still.
No, I love that. And I think, you're right. There are, given the work that I do now, you see a large uptick in these types of educational initiatives that are, I focus a lot on high school early careers, but to you post college grad, I will call them early careerists as well. You see a lot of employers, philanthropic organizations supporting this type of work because there's this ongoing tension between higher ed and industry because cost of college is astronomical, and so there's got to be this happy medium. So I think you're going to see, and I'm hoping you're seeing, really a boom in your business now, because I do think there are folks who need those specific services that you're looking to provide. So
Mhm.
kudos to you there. Now,
Thanks.
I want to transition into a little bit in your work about talent acquisition. So you are somebody who's obviously deeply embedded in this space, talent development, acquisition. How have you seen the expectations around talent pipelines evolve, particularly in the era that we're in now, AI, tech, and this digital transformation? What are you seeing in your space?
Yeah, another good question. So I spend a lot of time in government contracting roles, which is a little bit unique. So I can kind of speak a little bit on both, like the private sector and then the government sector.
Sure.
I think across board, we definitely see like so from a company perspective or from the candidate perspective, which one you want to hear?
I'm interested in both, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think when I think of you, I think of kind of the company perspective. But if you have both lenses, I'm sure the audience would love to hear about that.
Yeah, because I kind of work with both sides, so I kind of see both areas. But from a company perspective, I think there's still the same challenge that we've had for years, which is hiring managers. People that are looking to hire are don't always know what exactly they want that person to do. Meaning they have some basic kind of tick the boxes, but there's still a gap between learning how to evaluate a person from a holistic perspective. And I think what we see today is that a lot of people are changing careers. A lot of people are forced to change careers, or a lot of people have spent, 10, 15 years in industry A. They have great skill set, but then they're trying to translate that. So I think there's still gap from hiring manager perspective, from leadership perspective, to hire these people, of looking at the person and knowing how to have the right conversations to really tap into the potential of that person. So I think that is still missing. I think we're still very much like what background they have, what education they have, do they do exactly what we need them to do? And I think it's unrealistic, because that's why we struggle with talent, is because we're looking for ticking the boxes versus learning how to have that conversation. So I can have that conversation, but when I pass you on to the hiring manager, I have to have a conversation with the hiring manager first and educate them around, here's what I think this person brings to the table. I know they meet 75% of what you're looking for. I know you're looking for 95, but here's where that 20% here's how you can close that gap for this particular individual. And I think just working as a consultant with the hiring managers at these companies and helping them understand talent acquisition, essentially, right? So obviously there's also, if you work with agencies, it's a whole other battle, but I think that's the biggest challenge, is we have to be a little bit more flexible around bringing on talent and understanding that that talent is most likely going to need some kind of small development. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's large, but they need something. Same thing with young. So this is for like experienced people. For
Right.
young talent, another big issue is the biggest challenge companies have right now, and you see this all the time, is complaints about Gen Zs. But then it's like, it's kind of not their fault. Partially yes, but partially no. So Gen Zs, if you think about, they've spent, or any of us really, we spent high school, university time consuming. So as somebody's telling us exactly what we need to do, we have a step-by-step of how to get to the next step. We graduate, we need a GPA of this to get into the school. We need to pass this exam to get into the next level, to get a degree. When we get into corporate, all of a sudden, they want us to produce. They want us to create. They want us to innovate. They want us to ask good questions, when we never taught that, because we were just told exactly what we need to do to get to where we need to go. And then the complaint is, well, the young talent, they're not motivated. They're not working hard enough. They're not professional. They don't know how to show up. They don't know how to. Well, you have to teach them that. Like, you have to create an internal program where you can actually teach them that. And yes, it's an investment initially, but you're going to spend a lot more money by them leaving 6 months or 12 months. And the retention rate is going to cost you a lot more than you actually investing a little bit of time in the first month of them with you in a proper program and so on. So I think these kind of two pieces. I think on the individual side, so on the candidate side, the challenges that I see is, especially in the area that I'm in. So I'm in Northern Virginia. So expectations for salary is very high, particularly from fresh graduates, and even some experienced professionals, but particularly fresh graduates. And what I see is, I was talking to a couple of students from a prominent university, graduating with good degrees, but didn't really have experience in terms of internships or anything like that. And their expectation for salaries in the six figures.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and you would be astonished how often I have these conversations with young talent. And young talent, let's put them in a category of somebody who fresh graduate up to 5 years of experience. The
Okay.
expectations they come with is astronomical. And so again, I try to empathize with them, and I say, okay, they don't know what they don't know. Let me walk them through the process of how salaries are determined, what are they based on, and where do they fit in, right? And I think when you have those conversations, they're reasonable, and they're like, okay, I see where you're coming from. Yes, I'm willing to go to drop a little bit to the salary that's actually I fit into that criteria based on my experience, based on my education, based on the value I bring, and so on. So I think there's that disconnect as well, and then on top of that, I think there's also this. Um, I'm the old school crowd, and this might not be popular with everybody, but I'm old school crowd. Like, in your 20s, you just grind, you work and you grind. You're not going to necessarily have that balance. You can have that balance. Let me give you an example. I was talking to a client of mine. She's a lawyer, and I was asking her, I was like, do you guys have the same challenge with lawyers as other companies do, where young people coming in, they just kind of want to do the basics. They just kind of want to come in, clock out style, do bare minimum and leave. They don't really want to spend more time on really kind of growing on that company, developing themselves and so on. And she said, oh yeah, absolutely. Because lawyers, obviously, especially specific kinds, they make a lot of money. And so typically in the law, in law professions, they have a number of hours they have to work every week. And then if they want to earn a bonus, you only earn a bonus if you work extra hours, you help out on extra projects, on extra trials and cases and so on. And a lot of people, that what she said to me, a lot of young people in particular, like a lot of young lawyers, are not taking the bonus. Say, no, I'm good just with a salary. I don't want to work the extra hours. I'm good with the bonus. I'm good without the bonus, because
Right.
they already make a ton of money. And then I said, but do they still get promoted when they hit that mid-level of their career, or when they want to grow into senior? And the answer is no. So they're not chosen for promotion. And so when I work with a lot of young people, and that's the final thing I'll mention here, is that as a candidate, there's a cost to you being comfortable. And if you're okay with that cost, that's okay. That's a choice you make. But what happens is, young people, when they start have families and responsibility and mortgages and so on, all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I need to make more money. Hey, Brian, I need to get promoted. Well, my friend, you have not done but the bare minimum for 5 years. You did not upskill yourself. You did not grow. You did not volunteer for other initiatives. You did not offer value in other areas. Like, I don't know what else, there's nowhere for you to grow, because you are now behind. And I think that's a big thing for candidates to understand, is that if you're looking for roles, like, or if you're thinking about promotions and so on, you have to understand that it takes a certain level of experience. And there's a reason why there's, and up top, as you grow in your company, it's more slim. right? So there's not enough room. So the people that are going to get selected for those promotions are going to be people that spend those 20s and early 30s working and upskilling themselves, reskilling themselves, and actually taking time to develop their career. And so that's a big conversation I have with candidates on that side.
And let me follow up on something that you said there, because I think the conversation that you're having with these young people is so important. A couple things. One, where do you think they're getting this notion that they come out of undergrad or even grad school and, hey, I need to be making six figures? Where do you think that's coming from?
I think there's a couple of factors. This is just my speculations. Like, so this is just from my observation. I actually had somebody tell me this. They're so much in student debt that they just can't afford not to make six figures.
That's a good point.
So literally, I had a student. Yeah. I had a student who told me, like, I will never get out of debt if I only make 50 or 60K or whatever it is, depending on where you live and so on. And also I have to say that same student I was talking to also wasn't willing to move from where she was. And I said, you could go to a cheaper state, a cheaper city, and get your foot in the door and pay off your student loans and then move to the bigger city and so on. You could do that. So, that also, I think flexibility needs to be considered as well. Like, or you just stay where you are and spend 2 years looking for that dream job. And so anyway, so I think that's part of it. I think the financial pressures is a part of it, which is understandable. And that is something that, it's a more societal, system problem. And I'm not an expert to talk about, but I think that definitely plays a role. I think also there's something that I would have to put a little bit of blame on organizations, because job descriptions and job and salary ranges are all over the place. All over the place.
Yeah.
It's
the bands can be so wide.
So wide. I think, again, we're just not good with how we hire. The whole thing needs to be revamped, right? Like in terms of how we approach talent, how we hire for roles, what we pay people for each role and so on. Anyway, so I think that is not helping, because it's not a realistic picture. Right. And so I think they're just like doing a basic search. Because sometimes I do this, I look at salary ranges and I'm like, okay, what are competitors? I'm like, that doesn't make sense for this role. So I think companies, we don't have a standard, because it's like a software developer with 2-3 years of experience that this company is going to get paid this much amount, and another company is something else. So I think those ranges are just off in general. So I think that is a part of it as well. I think a big part of it is also there's this, there's inflation in the country, obviously. So we are, everything is more expensive. And I think it's just expensive to live. And so, and again, depending on where you are, I think that's another thing. If you're in places like New York or DC or big cities, your salary is going to be a little bit higher. So if you're applying for a remote work where the headquarters is, I don't know, somewhere else, like a small town or small state, that salary might not be, what I'm saying? So I think geographical areas are considerations as well, where the company's from. So I think a number of these factors. What are your thoughts? What do you think?
What's interesting, I think the necessity piece is something that I probably didn't give enough credence to, right? Like, look, I'm in so much debt. Like, I have to make this amount of money because I'm not going to be, doing this for X amount of time. I was going to go down the route more so of, I think that at times online social media type of content influences individuals to think that they should be making more than they actually should be, right? Like, there's no understanding of, to your point, this amount of experience, you fall within this band, right? You're not coming out as a new grad in an entry level role in most areas making 150K plus. That's just not realistic. But someone or something has influenced them to say, oh, I should be getting this because fill in the blank reason. So I think a lot of times, online has a role to play in that. The other thing too, I was going to go was also the bands, right? When you look at some of these roles and you look at, and I'll speak for city government specifically, I remember seeing bands that were like 74,000 to 189. And I'm like, well, of course, not that anyone would be crazy and say, hey, I should be making 189, but they're going to at least try to split the baby, right? And so if I'm coming out, I'm like, oh, well, I shouldn't be making the bottom. I should be at least, right at either 50% or a little bit below, which could get you closer to six figures. And so I think some of those things play a role in this. And in many states, New York is one of them, we do have laws now where you have to post realistic salary bands. And so I'm curious about how that is played in some of these new grad early careers mind as they search for roles?
Yeah, I think the social media pieces is definitely something that plays a role as well. I think there's a lot of romanticized ideas around how money is made, what goes, who that person is that's making the money, right? I always say, like, it's very easy to make money if you are, if you have the networks and the money backing, right? If you don't have those things, you're pretty average, and it's just called hard work and grind, right?
Right.
Or you go viral, right? But that's 0.001%. 0.00001% of that chances of that happening if people who are like trying to be influencers. I think social media has also kind of, again, give this romanticized idea about work. And everybody's putting all there when they're getting laid off, and how what their day is like a day in a life of a Twitter employee or an X or whatever, one of those stories. And it's not really the reality. And I think, and so people come in and say, I want to make money, I don't want to be stressed, and I don't want to, and I want what I want, and I want to do it when I want it, how I want it, etc. And it just doesn't work that way. It's not reality. It's just, people need to understand, it's just content, it's entertainment, it's content, it's hooks to get you to click on that video. And sure, some of it has validity, like some experiences, but 99% of it is just entertainment, and you cannot take it seriously.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think the other piece I'll mention here too is that I often coach a lot of young people as well. And I think when folks are in organizations, what I've noticed is that there is almost like an impatience with the level and pace at which growth is happening in an organization. And I often see folks just really kind of, because I am too one of those, you need to kind of grind. Whatever you're doing currently, are you doing that at a level of excellence? Because if you're not, we shouldn't be having this conversation about what my next step is and how I become this thing. You need to be knocking out what you're supposed to be doing before we even start having these conversations. And sometimes those conversations are tough to have with folks, but hopefully they get it, which kind of leads me into the second point around when you share with some of these folks about the realities of what their situation is or what the realities of work are. How are they receiving that information? In a positive way? Is there some pushback? I'm curious what you notice.
Overall, it's positive. I think the delivery of the message matters. I
True.
think I think it's just, again, like being empathetic, and choice of word matters, and just, I think it's just educating them in a kind way, and bringing them facts, and just explaining how the process works. I always say it's a process, and a process takes time to go from A to Z. Or this is why, this is why this is the salary range. This is why I think you qualify at this level, right? And I think most of it is positive. I haven't had anything too much pushback. Worst case, people just say, thank you, I'm just going to keep looking. So that's like, and they'll probably run into that reality at some point where they're going to look back and like, okay, maybe she was right. Or maybe somebody's going to pay them, because that's also a thing. I don't know if this happened in your industry, but about 2022, 2023, in the tech sector, in particular in government contracting, everybody was throwing out high salaries just to keep people, because that was the great resignation time, remember?
Right. Oh,
And
yeah.
so everybody was just like throwing money at people. Like, I mean, you don't even know the kind of conversations I've had where it's like, they want how much? 30,000 more? Okay, just give them 30,000 more. Like, what? Wild times,
Yeah.
because out of desperation, because
Right.
you need work to be done. You have clients knocking on your door, you need staff, and you're like, I'm going to bite the bullet and just give this person what they want, but also, to be fair, those people were top performance, and people are only willing to do it for those top performers, for those grinders. So it's not like every average Joe is going to get that whatever they want. It was really the peak performers that's like, I'm going to give that person whatever they want because I need them. And they were willing to, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, I'd love to change gears. Now, let's talk about your show and the purpose of your company's Shift, right? So you host the podcast Shift with Elena Agar, right? You emphasize ownership of performance and growth. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start your own podcast, really, and how it's enhanced your mission in helping others reach their own potential.
So the podcast started about 4 years ago with the mission to just create content and knowledge and share that. I was very much into content creation game very early on. I always say like even before the blogs were popular, I used to like want to write a blog and I had like something, I forget where, even which platforms, but I was always into like sharing and creating and kind of putting my thoughts out there. And then my business partner at that time said, you already talk to so many people, you might as well start recording your conversations. And I was like, that's not a bad idea. Let's do it. So it came out as kind of just like this content marketing tool. And then it really just grew into something completely different. I think it humbled me in more ways than one. It taught me, on a selfish level, it taught me how to just be a better listener, how to connect better with people, ask better questions, so on. It also became one of the best networking tools I've found because it's like, how often do you actually have a really interesting conversation with somebody that you don't know for 30 minutes to an hour? You connect with them, you get to know them. It's just a great relationship building tool that I didn't foresee until like looking back at my 200 episodes. And now like just thinking of like, if I have a business idea or thought or question or connection or some value I want to give, I'm like, let me see. Oh, you know what? I talked to Brian. I remember we talked about that thing like, hey, Brian, because you and I already have a relationship. So it's much easier to kind of have that business relationship after you've built that personal relationship through content creation game, right? So I think so it's been really valuable in that way. And I think it also helped me understand where I want to focus on in terms of what do I enjoy. Because I've talked to some people that were like I've spoken to them. And it's like interesting, but not really my jam. And so it helped me evaluate where I want to go in terms of my conversations, in terms of my business, and shift the company was created. Because through those conversations, and I talk a lot about performance and well-being and talent and growth and all those things. And I said, through those conversations and all those different shifts that we have to do, in order for us to shift well, we have to consider the basics of us, again, going back to being human, right? And so I've been doing this work for a long time, and we want everybody to be that productive, performing employee, as I mentioned in the beginning, but we forget that in order for us to be at our top performance, it actually goes back to the basics, the 5 pillars, which is what we focus on Shift, which is the physical well-being, mental resilience, social connections, career fulfillment, and nutrition. Because I think this is where we as a society, forget about organization, just as a society, as a community, have completely lost our way because we're more disconnected, we sleep less, we're more stressed out, burnt out, we eat horrible, we're sicker than ever before, we're more obese than ever before, across board, not at our top performance, and it's getting worse. And so we shift everything that we do is around these 5 pillars and helping people like truly be at their top performance with these shifts here.
No, I love that. And I love the kind of the alignment that you're starting to have with the show and now the company, right? It's all like really coming together beautifully. And so you talk about these 5 pillars. How do they really shape the way organizations and individuals engage with work?
So our focus, we spend a lot of time on working with managers and organizations. And so there's two sides to this. So one is the manager, but also the organization. When we go into working with managers and organizations, and they'll say, you know what, we have really great performers, would love for them to be even more high impact managers and so on. And so what they often forget is that as an organization, there's a role you play. So what managers need today, or even just anybody in an organization, what people need is not only taking care of those 5 pillars, so education around that, but also support and resources internally to do their jobs well. And what happens, particularly in management cases, when a person gets promoted, most of the time they do not get training around what does it take to lead other people? How do I become a leader? What behaviors? Who do I need to become this leader? And so you can have a high performer who is doing great, and maybe that person's great in all these pillars, but then they're in an organization that does not provide support or resources in that new role. So what I mean by that is that when a person gets promoted to a manager, they're still evaluated. A lot of cases, a lot of times, they're still evaluated on individual performance. So them as an individual performer versus the performance of their teams. Some companies do it where, the big consultancies, they're evaluated on like how many team members got promoted. How's your team doing in general? Like evaluating you based on your team, not you as an individual contributor. right? And so that's a big thing. Many organizations do not restructure the workflow of that person, so they still have expectations for them to do all their individual contributor work. So they're still attending meetings 6-7 hours a day that they don't really need to attend, but also they can't delegate because they were never taught how to delegate because they never got the training. And then on top of that, you want them at the end of that day, you want them to inspire, to motivate, to lead, to take care of themselves, do all these things. It's just not sufficient. Like that's not how things work. And so I think there's the individual piece of like, here's what you need to do to take care of yourself, but also your organization needs to create systems and processes that help you be a high performer. And a lot of organizations don't do that because a lot of organizations are money driven, which I understand. I get it. Business is business, but you want your business to grow, you better take care of your people.
Right, absolutely. And I love that, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it continues to evolve. So, kind of before we kind of get into some advice here, I want to just have you take a look back on some of the many career transitions that you've had. What has been the biggest surprise or unexpected lesson that you've encountered along the way?
There's been many, really. I think every step I've learned something. Every step, I've had my doubts and then triumphs and stuff like that. I think one of the biggest things is I've been my own worst critic for most of my career and still am. And I think that has been to my detriment in many cases. And so that's been understanding, my value in the workspace, what I bring to the table. I think that's been a big kind of, I lacked that for majority of my career. And I think part of it was because I kept shifting. And when I was growing up, a successful career meant you stayed at one company, you grew in that company, you worked for a big corporate and so on. And it's really only in the last few years that I realized that you need to define your own success. And so for most of my life, I've defined success based on what society deemed to be successful. And that was to my detriment because that made me not as great when I was in front of clients. It made me, not as confident when I should have been confident all along and just focused on getting better versus trying to play a catch up game.
No, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And so now, love to ask you for some advice here. And for folks who are listening, what advice would you give to professionals who may be also feeling stuck in their careers and unsure how to shift themselves into more fulfilling roles?
One thing that I see people struggle with is taking action. And I think we spend a lot of time just strategizing and analyzing and trying to plan and when things are going to happen. And what I know for sure is that no matter what plan you put into place, it's probably not going to be what you thought it was going to be anyway. So you might as well just take action. So focus on taking small actions that will help you figure out your next move. So meaning it could be as simple as spending 30 minutes today or this weekend looking at potential areas that interest you. Or if you don't even know what's interesting to you, talk to people who've made career changes. Listen to podcasts, read biographies is something I like to read. Like read biographies, look at how people made shifts in their lives just to like observe and kind of pick up some things that you might resonate with in your own journey. So I think taking action, baby steps, because that's another thing people are like, oh, I don't have time. I think the understanding that the non-action has a cost. I love what Tim Ferriss talks about. He said, what is the cost of inaction? And I would write down, if you don't start making the changes today, what is it going to cost you 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months, a year, 2 years? And in different areas of your life, in your financial health, in your well-being, in your career fulfillment, in your family life, what is it going to cost you? And if it's not going to cost you much, you're probably not aiming for the right things because you should be aiming for something that it's going to be such an impact. And if it's not going to impact you, that's probably why you're not motivated to make the change. Because in order to make the change, you have to actually see kind of where you're headed and why the particular, like, why do you want to make the change? So the why could be this current job is taking a toll on you. The why could be maybe you have no other choice but to go a different way. The why could be you've realized your values don't align with what you've been doing. The why could be you moved countries or regions and you now have to reinvent the game. The why could be you're no longer relevant in your field, so you have to make that change. So I think just really understanding your why and kind of looking at the tiny steps you can take today and writing down the cost of inaction and what is it going to cost you. And usually that gets people moving. So I think that's like the biggest thing. And the final thing is, when you don't know what to do, start with your health. Like that's it. I know it sounds like so, kumbaya and simple. And I don't mean to simplify it, but sometimes it's that simple. Go to the gym, do something you enjoy, get out of your own head, spend time with loved ones, like all the basic things that we need to be fulfilled as people is, before our careers, it's the people we have in our lives, it's the health that we have, right? The social circles that we have. So I think just focusing on that as you're navigating this journey is another simple place to start.
Oh, I love that. And as you look towards the future of what you have going on, what type of impact are you hoping to have in this next step or in this next phase in your career and life?
I am looking to create. Actually, that's what I'm not talking about it quite publicly, but I'm happy to share a little bit here. I have a gut feeling that the world of L&D is going to transform even more over the next 5 years, plus maybe even sooner. And I think the way we approach talent development organizations will not work much longer. I think there's already a lot of indicators around how there's not a lot of ROI around some talent development initiatives. And I think we're doing a lot of it wrong. And so what I'm trying to do is create a product that kind of closes that gap and actually creates something more tangible for people when it comes to behavior change, when it comes to change, whatever change they want to make, right? And really just bringing forth not to give too much into it, but essentially just creating a product that helps people grow in a very consistent baby step way that does not feel overwhelming in a world where we are overwhelmed, in a world that we're so busy and so on. But at the same time, you don't have a choice but to make some kind of steps forward. And I think we get stuck because whatever we do in L&D today, a lot of it is not efficient, it's not effective, and it doesn't impact real change. So my aim is to help people actually make that change, whatever that change is, with a big focus on careers, of course.
Ooh, I like that. Little foreshadowing for what's to come. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And lastly, what is one question you have for me?
One question I have for you is, what would you do if something was really easy for you? That's maybe looks hard now for you, but what if that was easy? What would you like take a chance on?
I guess if I'm being honest, this podcasting life has been a lot of fun. The rolling out of it is difficult, but the talking to people is really easy. I am very happy in the work that I'm doing day to day, right? But if there is a part of me at times that I wonder, how far could I take this? Right? Like, how far could this piece go? Because I feel like now that you've gone through my process, I develop these connections with folks, and we talk open and honestly about, pivotal moments in their lives, and it feels very natural to me, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't say, at times I do wonder, what if I did just kind of go with this? Like, how far is this going to go? So I think that kind of answers your question. And I'll be forthright and say, at times, to be honest, I'm a little scared of the answer, right? So I'm a little scared of the answer, but and I fully acknowledge that because I am having so much fun in other spaces. But I do think that sometimes, because some of the things that I get into, like this, some stuff is just coming really natural. I wonder what it would be like if I just took off with that. So who knows? Who knows? It's a great question.
Speak it into existence.
I know, right? But that's a great question. So I appreciate you asking me. And look, this was a long time coming. So Elena, I've been on your show a couple times. I love that you had a chance to come join this show because I think your story is really powerful. And to hear a little bit about what you're looking to build in the future, that's exciting. So I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show. Now you get a chance to be on the other side of the mic this time, which I think is always a nice break from the norm. But would love for you to share where our listeners can support you and find you online.
I hang out on LinkedIn quite a bit, but I remember I was recording a podcast one time, and my boyfriend overheard me, and he said, there's that song. It's called, I don't even know it. I actually went back and listened to it, but it's like, there's a song, I guess it's called "Google Me, Baby."
That's funny. I didn't know that.
So there's like I forget who even sings it, but it's like he was like, you should just start telling people like Google me, baby, you know. So now I just tell people I'm just Google me, and like I'm the only Elena Agaragimova, which is beautiful because my name is so unique. So I'm easy to find. If you just Google me, my podcast will show up, my LinkedIn, everything will show up.
I like that. Google me, baby. That's the core. I may even name this episode "Google Me, Baby." So I like that. I like that. So look, that'll do it for today's episode. Again, I want to thank Elena Agaragimova for coming on, for joining the show. A lot of great insight here. I'll be sure to share her information in the show notes. But as she noted, you could definitely Google her, right? But so I hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Elena, thank you so much again. Thanks for listening to Why I Left. Join us next time for more inspiring stories about growth, resilience, and transformation. Visit us online at www.whyiLeft.co. That's whyiLeft.co. And subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Alive Podcast Network. See you soon.